Hello, my name is Kimberly Montgomery, and I am making this video to educate people on the social geography issue of drugs, violence, and gangs in Central America, or better known as Latin America. Latin America is located here. Before we start, I want to give a backstory on Latin America and why today it is so filled with violence and drug laundering. Latin American countries are some of the poorest countries in the world, along with African countries. Now, to say that a country is poor means that it will lead to violence and then have a severe drug problem is not necessarily true. However, in this case it is. Most of the violence in Latin American countries came from unequal wages and high unemployment rates, meaning the rich get richer and the poor stay poor. For the most part, this push of not being able to move up in the world has led to street riots and ultimately a war. A great example of this can be seen in El Salvador's history. El Salvador's war began with the Farabinudo Martí National Liberation Front, which is a guerrilla group, going against the military of El Salvador in 1979. The war went on until 1992 when the UN and the Farabinudo Martí National Liberation Front came to a peace agreement. Through the war, thousands of people died and many others were injured. It is reported that more than 75,000 people died and many more fled to the U.S. for safety. So you might be asking yourself, what does this all have to do with drugs and gangs? Well, the wars led to the development of gangs which produced drugs. Wars cost money, and people did not have any money until the idea of selling drugs to other countries was brought up. This money made from selling the drugs went towards funding the individual wars going on in each Latin American country. This tradition has continued to today, even though there is no war going on. The drug production has increased, and so has gang activity. Specifically looking at cocaine production, it is one of the highest, with the greatest amounts being shipped to the US and Europe. Focusing in more on El Salvador, many of the people who fled to the U.S. were sent back after the war was over. Many of these people joined gangs because when they were sent back to the country they once knew, it was not the same. In El Salvador, there are two dominant street gangs that have emerged since the war. The Maria Salvatrucha 13 or MS-13 and Barrio 18 or Cali 18. Cali 18 and MS-18 both have strong presences in El Salvador, but they have grown from regular street gangs to having gang presences in many other Latin American countries over the years. The gangs originally started in the U.S. from the immigrants fleeing from the Civil War going on in El Salvador. The gangs became established in the 1980s. Now, Cali 18 is one of the largest youth gangs there is going in El Salvador. After the war had ended and the immigrants were sent back to Latin America, the gang activity spread along with it to places like El Salvador. It is estimated that more than 20,000 criminal gang members were sent back after the civil wars had ended between the years 2000 and 2004. There are three main factors that made these gangs grow: weak law enforcement, high unemployment rates, and criminalizing more gang-related activity. The law enforcement officials in El Salvador can be very easily paid off. They don't have a high wage, and any extra they can make, they will. The unemployment rate among the Salvadorians is about 8%, which makes up around 6 million people. The youth unemployment rate is at 15 to 16%, and about only 44% of the people have steady jobs. The government in El Salvador since the year 2000 has put in place many laws making gang activity criminal and have put thousands of gang members in jail. This has pushed gangs to reevaluate and recruit more members. Between these two gangs, it is estimated that more than 11,000 people are registered gang members. The number of people associated with these gangs is only expected to grow due to the high increase in youth population and high unemployment rates. These gangs have evolved from drugs and violence to weaponry, human trafficking, and so much more. The weaponry these gangs used went from makeshift weapons to full-blown military-grade weaponry. For example, there have been reports of using and selling AK-47s, Gauss, AR-15s, and machine guns, and many more. The current issue of violence and drugs is a pressing issue, and so far all attempts to deal with the issue has not been so successful. The U.S. government has made several attempts to stop these gangs by arresting their leaders, but gang presence is still prevalent. Gangs, drugs, and violence are a prevalent problem facing Latin American countries, and it is a serious problem that needs to be addressed. There have been several proposed solutions, but none have reversed the problem. Thank you for listening to this issue, and I hope I made it clear about the urgent need for this problem to be addressed.